Welcome to Breaking the Line, the ECNL Podcast, where we cover all things ECNL and beyond. The ECNL was successful yet again with nearly 1,000 coaches at the ECNL Coaching Symposium and AGM in Las Vegas, where the speakers were off the charts. We're joined by two more of the speakers as Christian Lavers and Doug Bracken sat down with two distinguished members of U.S. Soccer. We'll get to them in a moment. I do want to remind you that part of this podcast is hearing from you. If you have questions that you want answered, please send them to info@theecnl.com. With that, joining Christian Lavers and Doug Bracken on today's show is Emily Cosler and Matt Crocker from U.S. Soccer. Emily Cosler is the Senior Director of Strategy for U.S. Soccer. She joined U.S. Soccer's Strategy Department in 2022. As the Senior Director of Strategy, Emily's work has primarily focused on strategic projects, including the U.S. Way Sporting Strategy, the Safe Soccer Clearance Program, 2027 and 2031 FIFA Women's World Cup bids, and partnerships with key landscape stakeholders such as national member organizations and professional leagues. Matt Crocker is the Sporting Director for U.S. Soccer. Matt became U.S. Soccer Sporting Director in 2023, overseeing the entire sporting department and focusing on the men's and women's national team programs, youth national teams, and the extended national teams. Matt Crocker is responsible for setting U.S. Soccer's sporting vision, overseeing the performance of all national teams, implementing the technical development plan, developing sporting culture, philosophy, ensuring greater communication, and sharing of best practices. Matt is formerly the English Football Association Head of Development Teams and Southampton Director of Football Operations. He brings more than 25 years of experience in player development and coaching with proven success at the club, youth, and senior international levels. It is great to have Emily Cosler and Matt Crocker from U.S. Soccer on. So with that, I turn it over to the CEO and President of the ECNL, Christian Lavers, who is joined by the VP of the ECNL and their Chief of Staff, Doug Bracken. Take it away, Christian.
Welcome to the podcast, Breaking the Line at the 2025 ECNL Symposium. I'm Christian Lavers here with Doug Bracken. We're excited to have two of the presenters at this year's event. U.S. Soccer Senior Director of Strategy, which is a mouthful.
Crushed it.
Emily Cosler, and U.S. Soccer Sporting Director Matt Crocker. Welcome to you guys. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, yeah.
Just start real simple and easy. Just give a 30-second answer on what you each do with U.S. Soccer, and then I'll go into the more hard-hitting questions.
Perfect. I'll kick us off. So, Senior Director of Strategy, in my role, I get to oversee some of the new corporate development and strategic initiatives. So, projects that are typically cross-departmental in nature and have a chance to really maximize the impact of what we want to do at U.S. Soccer. So, examples like our Safe Soccer Clearance Program, like our 2031 Women's World Cup bid, and also working closely with Matt and team on the U.S. Way and how we, rethink and work together on the youth ecosystem.
Matt?
Sporting Director, so my role is to oversee the development of the 27 national teams, which are men's and women's senior teams, the youth teams on the boys and the girls, men's and women's side, and our extended national teams. And I describe it as being the gatekeeper of the culture and the philosophy of our national teams. And the gatekeeper business, because I don't own it, doesn't belong to me, and my job is to hopefully leave it in a better place than where I found it.
Well, let's jump right into that topic. And I know this may be embedded in the U.S. Way, which you'll be presenting today to the almost 1,000 coaches that'll be here, which is a fantastic opportunity to get that out to a lot of people that are going to be impactful, hopefully, in getting it out to the grassroots. But there are famous countries with famous identities in how they play. And the American identity or style of play, you could argue maybe there was one and then it's changed and evolved. Maybe we say, what is it? So I'll direct that at you as what's your vision of what the American style should be, or do you believe that there won't be one that's across men and women and all national teams? How do you see style of play in our country?
Yeah, it's a really great question to kick us off, and I think first and foremost, probably the one thing to point out from US Soccer's perspective is our job is not to try and dictate anyone's style on any league, on any club. We understand that every club is unique and every club will have its own ideas of, both technically, tactically, physically, psychologically, socially, of how they want to develop its young players. I guess my role is to look at our 27 national teams and go, what do we want the identity of those teams to be? And, of course, there are traits, American traits, that we want the fans to see when they watch our teams that reflect them as they sit in the stands. And, of course, we want to be a high pressing, forward, exciting, dynamic team, but also we want to embrace some of the grit qualities that exist in American sport where, when you're up against, so-called, difficult moments in games or so-called perceived better opponents, there's a real belief that you can overcome and win. And I think, the American identity, in particular at senior level around winning, is going to be crucially important to our success going forward.
And do you see a difference between the men and the women and how you envision that style coming based on they're in different spots on the world stage?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, when we went through the interview process with both, Emma and Maurizio, I think there was certain, on-field and off-field qualities that they both bring, and I'll give you some examples. So in terms of being outstanding cultural leaders who believe in the power of the individual, who believe in, their roles as head coaches is to maximize the potential of the individuals within the group, within the team, etc. It's a critically important part of the role. Success for coaches doesn't always happen on the grass. There's so much time and opportunity to help players get better individually as groups and obviously ultimately as a team. So I think they were both great cultural fit for us. But I think also both of them, their ideology of the game reflects what we want to try and achieve from a national team's perspective. And I've mentioned, we want to develop technically outstanding players. We want to be front-footed and aggressive and dynamic and fast. And, both of those coaches in their coaching history, live and believe by those values. So, that's why it was a great cultural fit and also a great game style fit for us.
I'll dive a little bit into the pathway of players coming into the national teams, because I think one of the challenges, and there's pros and cons at every level, but one of the challenges that people talk about a lot right now domestically is that there's a shrinking number of young Americans that are making appearances in MLS and that are playing in MLS as it's become very, very heavy on internationals coming into that league compared to years ago. We obviously have some really talented players in Europe playing at various levels in terms of how much time they're getting. How do you look at the professional pathway, and what can we do to get more Americans, young Americans, opportunities in pro soccer here?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I don't think there's one silver bullet that solves everything. I think it's probably doing a number of things better, and you can look at the individual development pathway for players. Clubs getting better and more educated on recognizing talent, what it might look like at certain ages and stages, and then also having a system that believes and allows high potential, young children or kids or players to hit bumps in the road and support them through those difficult moments that come out of the other end. So, I think things like, individual development plans, player audits at club top to bottom that, means that you might not sign that 28-year-old left back because you've got a 17-year-old who might be ready in the next 12 months and you don't fill that spot. So I think there's probably, like I mentioned, both in the player development space, but also the overall club technical recruitment, sporting space, to make sure that everything is connected and aligned. And then finally, for me, it's about making sure that every club has its own identity and philosophy on player development, and they hold themselves and each other to account on those moments. Because, of course, you could be in a situation where if you work on the talent ID team, you want to bring in players. But actually, sometimes some of the best scouts are not to bring in players and recognize that, there's somebody within the system that will be ready in a certain period of time to come through. So, I think we need to do a load of things better, and our job in that role as US Soccer, because I'm sure the clubs are looking and going, okay, well, what's your role in all this? Our job is to make sure that we are a really great support service to every club to ask the right questions at the right time, and for them to also look at us as in the future, to be a support mechanism for when they have questions or concerns or queries, that the first place they maybe look to in the future is US Soccer, which the conversations I've been having the last 18 months hasn't always been the case. So we have to step up internally first, and we have to lead the way and show hopefully what good looks like. But yeah, I think it's got to be a collaborative process.
I know UEFA has requirements on home trained players. Germany's probably most famous for requiring German-based players. Do you think there's a discussion that should be had about having some sort of requirement of either home-trained players or American players within American professional soccer?
I think that would be a really good discussion and debate to have. And, every club will have its different view on, what that number might be. And, we're the same in US Soccer. And I've come from an environment where that is debated long and hard and heavy. But I also think, sometimes the opposite side is, rather than to dictate, sometimes to promote, to give more benefits to those clubs who are recognised as playing more and developing more and better homegrown players. And I think, there's an argument to have around, giving more, whether that's US Soccer recognising that, we can heavily discount or give a number of free places on our pro or A licence from coaches from certain clubs who are developing more and better homegrown players. There's more resources available. There's more access to coach education, to our national team camps, to our national training centre, etc. I think I'd love for a situation where we bookend both sides, that we have maybe some mandatory thinking around it, but we also have some really great incentives that clubs feel like as if they're benefiting from player development.
We're off and rolling on this edition of Breaking the Line, the ECNL Podcast. When we return, Christian Lavers will flip the switch to college soccer with Emily Cosler and Matt Crocker from US Soccer. That after this message. Did you know ECNL provides free recovery sessions? ECNL has partnered with MarkPro, a staple for recovery in professional sports. MarkPro is a unique, safe, portable e-stim device that feeds sore muscles and removes metabolic waste. Stop by the Recovery Zone during your next event. Welcome back to Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast, as Christian Lavers and Doug Bracken are joined by US Soccer's Emily Cosler and Matt Crocker. When we went to break, Christian Lavers promised to talk about college soccer, and that's what we'll do now. Take it away, Christian.
So I'll go down a step then in the pathway to college. And Emily, I know you've been in a lot of these discussions. College soccer's kind of in chaos. You have the NIL issue, which I think is probably uniquely American. I like to say the Atlantic Coast Conference now includes the Pacific Coast. The Big Ten is actually 18. So there's all sorts of strange things going on in soccer. Yep. The revenue pressure on soccer is real, especially on the men's side. There's real issues on the developmental side of a 3 months or a 4 month season versus a 10-month season. So I just threw a load of variables at you.
No surprises, though. That's a good thing.
Where do you guys see college soccer in this pathway? And on the women's side, probably more people have seen it as part of the talent pathway, and that may or may not be changing in some degree with the NWSL and I guess now USL as well. But where do you see college soccer in all of this?
Yeah, so I think college is the most uniquely American asset that we have. And you think about the money that's being spent on soccer specifically, right? There's 212 Division I men's programs today. There's north of 350 women's programs that have some of the best infrastructure and facilities and support staff that is truly being spent on soccer. And historically, it's existed almost in a swim lane parallel to what the federation's doing or parallel to what the youth members and or even the professional leagues are doing. And a lot of our goal, I think, moving forward is figuring out how to better integrate soccer into that player pathway that Matt spoke about, right? That there's an understanding that if we unlock the resources and just capabilities that exist within the college space, that we actually have a really unique opportunity. And so we won't say off the bat that we've got to move immediately to a 10-month model and we have to do XYZ and we have to raise ABC standards. We think there's a massive opportunity for dual benefit, both from a programs and a university perspective, to start to reduce some of their costs, look at revenue potentials, and protect student athlete welfare. And on the U.S. soccer perspective, we see an opportunity to have more kids playing longer into their career, being in a development environment that connects them with the pro leagues, connects them with the youth members, right? There's creative solutions that the door has never been more open to because of all the changes in the college landscape you just talked about. The appetite is there in a place that I don't think the appetite to make big changes really existed even 3 years ago. And so a lot of our conversations today on both the men's and women's side is saying, how do we best support student athletes? What's going to be best for our players? And then what decisions do we need to make that allows us to both support the really elite professional national team pathway, but also the tens of thousands of players that see college as a great opportunity to get an education, to continue playing, and then moving into coaching, refereeing, talent ID, sporting director roles, because the support for those positions and for that staff actually largely comes from the college game and from those who have degrees and who played in those positions. So I think there's more benefits than just the pro or national team player pathway. We see it as a huge opportunity to have continued playing opportunities, to develop more staff education opportunities, then also to support those players who maybe aren't quite ready to sign a pro contract or really value an education or some of those other components.
I just coming just very quickly on that, just with my technical head on, and I think if you just focus it on the women's and the girls' side, I think selfishly from the pre-pro and pro environment, 65% of our players in our under-17s come from your environment, from the ECNL, which is tremendous credit to all the great work that's been going on. However, if when those young women then go into the college environment, and that season is only 3 months, you go to another country and the players on the same level as those young women are training and playing for 10 months of the season. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to basically say that over a period of time, one of two things will happen. Either you'll stagnate in your development if you stay here and do that 3-month season, or you're going to get better if you are playing and training, because the training environment is critically important. If the training and the playing environment is 10 months, it's longer, it's of a varied level, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to go, the model's not sustainable long term for girls and young women on that side. And we've got to think logically how we change that. And that's purely with my technical head on, but it's averages. You're going to stay here, but if you get this program, you're going to go.
Doug Bracken has a question.
Do you think that our college and professional leagues think they have a role in development of the American player? I mean, we've talked about that, whether or not they would say that that's a priority for them. It doesn't seem to be.
I mean, we had this debate. So, we spent a lot of time over the last year internally within our national teams, the US way. What's going to be our style of play? How do we really want our coaches to coach these young players when they come into our environment? And, I feel like we've done some really great work on that, and our national coaches are now, fully aligned, and it's launched internally. But what we got to remember is we might be lucky to get 5% of contact time with players. Player development happens in clubs. 95% and probably more of player development is the club's responsibility, because that's where the players are. That's with the coaches for way, way more time than we can ever possibly imagine. But what we have to do as US Soccer is celebrate that and recognize it and go, hey, if you've got players that are developing and doing well, you're doing some great work. But also from US Soccer's perspective, we have to support the system better. We currently don't have a fully resourced coach education system to support all coaches in your environment and environments at grassroots or wherever the age and stage is. So we have to look internally deep at ourselves and go, what's our plans for supporting the game and being a service provider for the game in a much, much better, clearer way than we've ever done before. But player development happens in the clubs. We might be lucky just to add the cherry on the cake because of a Youth World Cup or someday, sometimes that they come through the pathway. But coaches and clubs, local clubs, regional clubs, every contact in the pathway, that is the critical, most important part of any player development program.
Yeah, and just to build on that, something we'll talk about later during our presentation is there's been a pretty massive shift, I think, in the posture, the tone from U.S. Soccer, where exactly to what Matt said, we want to be in service to soccer, in service to the clubs, whether it's the professional leagues or it's, the first grassroots opportunity you have at the age of 3, that we see our role as a federation to be in service to those groups. And so whether that's through coaching education and professional development opportunities, whether that's through a club and country partnership and using individual development plans, or whether that's through economic alignment and helping, sustain college or sustain, some of the growth and the commercial growth of these pro leagues that then can be invested back into the landscape. That is the role that we see ourselves taking, and a lot of what U.S. Soccer will kind of look to share over the coming months is from that in service to soccer mindset, and seeing us as, we're down here supporting those who are, in their environment, in their communities, in their cities with the players 95+% of the time, and what can we do from a federation perspective to best support those environments is that is point blank what we're looking to do.
I think we would all agree, not that you guys should be held responsible for the past cultures of U.S. soccer and how they interacted with the ecosystem. What's been the catalyst for that kind of change in mindset? Because that was not the mindset. I think we would all agree with that. So what's been the catalyst for that kind of change in mindset from your side?
So I've been in role, 18 months now, and the interview was quite a rigorous interview process. And the one thing that really stood in my mind through the interview process was, I think both from Cindy and JT, the opportunity for, I don't mean a fresh start or a blank piece of paper, because it's, you always come into things that are built and things that are great. But there was a real a thirst for drive and change. And, I'm a projecty type of guy. And I just got really excited about the opportunity that existed to, not just because we've got these amazing events coming up like World Cups and Olympics and stuff, but to use, not those events, just great, we've done those events, now we go back to doing what we've always done, but using those events to be in the catalyst for real long-term change and opportunity in the country. So I think that's what truly excited me. And, you'll hear us talk today, there's nothing that we're proposing that is rocket science or revolutionary or changing. The game evolves, there's nothing new in the game, as we all know. But I think the biggest thing that we want to do is we want to collaborate, we want to work with, we recognize there's bits in the past that we haven't done and we haven't got right, and we have to look at ourselves first. But, this word in service to the game and in this country is going to be our sort of mantra going forward. We want to authentically be the one-stop shop for all of your coaches and technical staff and administrative staff and other operation staff that exist at every age and level of the game. We want US Soccer to be the first port of call for any training, questions, concerns, challenges, complaints. We really want to get better. And I think, the approach that Cindy and JT, led by the leadership, is, let's just be more open and work collaboratively with the environment to get to where we want to go. But I think one more point I want to make, because I know I've talked a long time, is we also know that we'll hit moments where not everybody will agree. And then when those moments come, we as US Soccer, as the governing body, we have to say, this is our research, this is where we're coming from, this is the why, and we're going in that direction. And we want everyone to come with us, but we're not going to be able to please every environment all of the time. But I think as long as we are open, we are honest, and we listen to the challenges that come the other way, and we adjust based on feedback, I think we have an opportunity of achieving something special in this country with the way the game could be set up.
I'm going to look specifically at the pathway for like a 16 to 20-year-old male player, because I think it's the biggest challenge we have right now in the country. I mean, your numbers, there's 350 some odd college female choices. There's far less college men's programs. I think the numbers are somewhere around a half of the men's programs are international players. So again, we have a similar problem with the young American. Not only is it hard to get into pro, it's hard to get into college.
Both levels.
The financial challenges on the men's side, for a variety of reasons, are higher. Obviously, the federation just settled just won a very long running case with the old NASL in the pro spaces, because there's not there's not a robust structure of multiple levels of pro leagues as there are in other places. So there's a real challenge of what happens to those top kids. And even if I think we're being honest, in most of the academies, the pro academies even, the youth players are still generally playing youth players. There's not a lot of youth players playing men or playing multiple years older. How do we solve that issue? Because to me, that's a really big problem. And it's starting now to be felt all the way down to the parent of the youth player saying, well, if my kid's really into this, where's the next step taking him? Because it's harder and harder to see that.
I would just piggyback on that, because I think this is probably part of the answer, is how important is alignment in the ecosystem? Because we have a lot of different entities, right? How important in that quest,
the ecosystem of youth, pro, college, everything. Yeah.
How important is alignment in that quest to service all players, but that particular demographic as well?
We left the easy questions outside.
No, listen, I'll start. I think to the last question here, we talk a lot about, I think there's importance for alignment or collaboration, but there isn't a one perfect pathway. And I think that's something as part of the ecosystem review and the past work we've done over the 18 months and recognizing that one of the strengths of the U.S. is being able to offer different pathways that could have the same end outcome. So that no matter, if you play in LA and you have access to an amazing ECNL club from day one, or you're in the middle of Montana and you just love soccer and you want to play, we need to be able to ensure that there are proper pathways for a different type of kid, one that starts earlier in their adolescent, one that starts later, but it can still have a chance to make it to whatever their desired end outcome might be. Is it the national teams, is it the pro leagues? And so I think collaboration and alignment is important, but not forcing a certain pyramid structure or a one-way fits all, because that, in my opinion, takes away some of the actual strength of what we're trying to do in the American soccer landscape. We have a lot of people that want to invest and to support, and we need to make sure that there is collaboration versus a forced pyramid, in my opinion. But I'd be curious your thoughts, Matt.
No, I agree with you.
Thank goodness.
Well, and I'll just add some context to that. I mean, if you look, we talk about the country as a continent. Mm-hmm. There's 30 clubs in MLS. There's like 4 USL championship teams west of the Mississippi. You could find, I wouldn't even want to guess the number of pro level clubs in London, at various levels. So there's just a gigantic gap for that player. What do we do about that?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about one thing. I was talking to JT, our CEO, a couple of weeks ago about that 18 to 22-year-old. One of my big projects right now is looking at the college soccer opportunities. And right now that is a gap. And you've got, even in the college landscape, you're flying West Coast, East Coast back to the West Coast. You're playing 3 to 4 months, and you maybe go to class 2 days a week because you're on the road the rest of them. And I think there becomes a question when you turn 18 of what's best for me. Is it to go and try to work with MLS? Is it to go to college? Is it to go to Europe? And so I think we need to have larger amounts of support and direction for that player and allow them an opportunity to have a proper development cycle. So if that means 10 months in college and changing for a subset or all of the 212 Division I men's programs, if they want to move to a model like that, we'd be all for it. We want to support it. We want to figure out what's best for that player. But I think in general, we are of the mindset that having structured opportunities for a proper player development pathway at that 18 to 22-year-old, especially on the men's side, is a current opportunity for us to figure out what we want to do about it, so that we have chances to keep American players here if that's what's best for them, or to send them to a club that is best for them. So it's all focused around the player and what their needs and desires are, and then we can build the infrastructure and systems around that.
I come from a country where there's 92 professional clubs in a tiny little island, and a majority of those clubs will have a free program from under 9s all the way through to under 18s, through to under 23s, through to first team. And probably there isn't a kid in the country that is more than 30 minutes away from any one of those programs. So, that's quite a unique and different setup. And that's maybe the challenge that we look at and go, that's a significant, opportunity for that country. But when you think of the US and you think about the size, the scale, the resources, the number of kids that, play soccer now, but also could play soccer in the future. There's also some like unbelievable opportunities that we could, if we build the right pathway and the right partnerships and we have the right collaboration and the right systems, that there's some real opportunities that could, be better than what majority of our neighbours face. I'm sure they're looking at us going, wow, look at the access and the opportunities. I think sometimes you always look at things with either a glass half empty. I think if we look at the glass half full model, recognise there's things that we can learn, but we also understand geographically there's so many differences. But what are our opportunities, the resources in this country, the number of kids that aren't, that could be playing? How do we get it in every community? Because there's a lot of disadvantaged kids right now who would love to play soccer and maybe might not have that opportunity. So how do we think collectively about solving those problems together? I think that gives us some great opportunities.
One of our sort of approaches has been by broadening the base of the competitive player and raising the level of the average. You're starting to push the top up. And so you're growing wide and you're pushing the top up. And it's running now into that sort of artificial ceiling now that you have so many players that are saying, okay, now I want more, and it's hard. That, I think, will be a big project. I'll ask that maybe within the context of 2026 is a big moment. I went to the World Cup in 1994. I remember being in Chicago for one of the games as a young kid. How do we make the momentum and the moment of 2026? And I know there's some things after that. They're not quite as big as 2026. But how do we extend that as an inflection point and not a momentary party where the nation's attention is on soccer and then it moves on? Because that's kind of seemed like how big events here have been in soccer. Is it's a really high exciting moment, whether it's the Olympics and the women or it's the World Cup, and then life goes on as normal. There's no sustained momentum.
I think there's a couple opportunities, right? So you look at 1994 and the birth of MLS coming out of that World Cup, and then you look at 1999, obviously, with the women winning that year, and it took us a couple tries. We eventually got to the Women's Professional League. That was the legacy, if you will, of 1999. And so last year, U.S. Soccer officially announced Soccer Forward Foundation as our legacy platform or legacy program for the 2026 World Cup. And really the focus of that platform will be on advocacy and expanding impact and access to the game. And so what Matt just talked about, I think Cindy's go-to line is that we want everyone to be able to drive or to walk, take public transit, or ride a bike to a safe place to play soccer. And a lot of what Soccer Forward will look to do is, not U.S. Soccer coming in to run a bunch of programming, but how do we start to equip communities, equip our members, our state associations, schools, recreational clubs, to bring soccer to their community and bring it in a safe manner, so that when you're 9 years old and you're watching 2026 and you're seeing soccer for the first time and you go, hey mom, I want to play next season, it's not a complete mess trying to figure out where that opportunity is. Or if you say, hey man, my friends and I we just watched the U.S. with this huge upset win, we want to go play soccer. How do we make sure that where a place to go walk or ride your bike is to go play soccer? And so I think a lot of the focus on 2026 as of right now will be on access and participation, and getting those kids in at the very beginning of their love for the game, and then figuring out, okay, we've got them here. What does the pathway look for them? Whether it's to stay recreational, this is always a social element to them, or they want to be the next Alex Morgan or Sophia Smith or Christian Pulisic or Weston McKinney, and they want to figure out what that pathway looks like. 2026 legacy will be a lot about ensuring every kid has a chance to do that and follow their dreams, no matter what the dream looks like. Yeah, and I also think from the team's perspective, the team has a vital role to play in, not just on the field. I mean, on the field is critically important because the fans want to be excited and the kids want to go and watch and go, wow, I want to play soccer after that. If you're a parent, you go, oh, great, I want to get involved in the game, whether that's as a referee or a coach or whatever, or administrator, whatever that role might be. And of course, the team's performance on the field is going to hopefully create that energy and that excitement. But I also think the stories of the players behind the scenes, we as US Soccer have to do a better job at telling the stories of the players, where they come from,
the leagues, the teams that they started with, their first coach, why they fell in love with the game. And, you see it now on, a lot of these behind the scenes, documentaries. Fans, of course, they want to see the game, but they want to really deeply build a connection with the players and the team behind the scenes. And I think, from US Soccer's perspective, we started to talk about how do we tell the stories of the players better. And I think we're doing some nice work behind the scenes that will hopefully be able to launch that prior to the World Cup. So I think there's on the field stuff going on, but also the off the field stuff.
I think if Dean Linke was to chime in here, he would talk about Alexi Lalas using some bright red hair in 1994 to launch a long media career, quite probably intentionally, and I think he's nodding in the background there. So I understand that, agree with that. Second question here, bigger picture. And I think you worked at Bain.
I did. So, don't hold it against me.
Very, very good at analytics and benchmarking and comparisons. Yep. And obviously you have a background in England. What lessons would we take, and you might have very different perspectives on this or areas, what are one or two things from other countries that we can take here and do well, but not be the flavor of the month? Because there has definitely been we were going to be like the Dutch, and then we're going to be like the Spanish, and then we're going to be like the whoever's the flavor. And we can't do that. That's not sustainable. But what are some things that we could take from other countries, one or two things that say, whether it's business or structure or player development or whatever, and if we really intentionally embedded it into our system, would move the needle in a positive way?
I love the question where you said about you're from Bain and you've got an analytics background and you're from England.
It's implied that you're in England. You must be wicked smart.
No, definitely not. I mean, look, I think if I just look back, there was. So I was fortunate at the time to join a different federation. I joined England in 2011 or 12 when it was just at the infancy of building this national training centre. The Charter for Quality, which was the defining system for player development in the country, was coming to the end of its life cycle, and there was a lot of talk about the Elite Player Performance Plan and new ideas and new ways of working. There was also talk about collaboration between, the English FA, the Premier League, the Football League, the grassroots game wasn't talking to each other and all aligned. And, we as England at that time hadn't won anything since 1966, but every major tournament it was coming, which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There was. So I think it was a moment in time where the country came together and, same types of things, what are the FA going to be leading on? What do they believe in? How are they going to support the game? What's the role of the Premier League, the Football League, the Football Foundation and the grassroots? And I do feel that, a clearly aligned plan and a vision for the whole game, which was, I think it was Unite the Game, Inspire a Nation. That was the logo, the sort of the mantra that was drilled in, and all these, the number of projects across all of these various governing bodies, federations were created, as well as the National Training Centre and the role of England and the England DNA and stuff like that. And it feels so similar to what we are going through now, where there's this moment in time where if we don't grab this now, I'm not sure the game will ever fundamentally change in this country, So the similarities are, my biggest learning from that period is, seize the moment. And it's hard because, there needs to be so many difficult conversations and, collaboration and relationships built that have been fragile and been broken in the past. But, we have to all see this as an opportunity to all start on the starting line together and go, that's where we want to go, and what do we all need to give and take to support that system going forward. So my biggest learning is like seize the moment, and I can really sense that starting to build in the background.
Yeah, I'll go a little bit of a different direction. I think one of the topics that we've talked about a lot recently is how do we build stars that transcend the game, right? Those players where you think about, it's been 25 years and Mia Hamm is still a household name, right? You look at what Messi has done, no matter where he goes, there are, millions and millions of people that follow. You look at what Sam Kerr did in the 2023 Women's World Cup and how you have an entire country who is watching a sport because you have these larger-than-life figures and stars who obviously it starts with performance on the pitch, and there's a certain element of, they're goal scorers, they're incredible players. But I think a lot of what Matt just talked about of starting to tell stories about how these people have come from communities like ours, how they are invested in, giving back to the game, how they engage with their teams and they engage with their family and their friends. And when you have those star players, they bring a different level of attention and investment into the game that, again, goes all the way back down just into the landscape, right? U.S. Soccer is a nonprofit. We're not looking to profit off of our national teams or keep the money for ourselves. But when you have an opportunity to have those figures that transcend sport, and they're at the ESPYs and they're walking the red carpet during awards season, and then they're up in New York on talk shows, there's an opportunity to get a certain fan or a certain demographic that maybe historically hasn't grown up with soccer. That wasn't what their kind of first love was. And, in the U.S., I would argue many people, their first love is, either the NFL or baseball or their college team. And there's a smaller subset of people where soccer is that first one. But when you have that star power, it starts to bring a different type of fan, or maybe historically someone who wasn't engaged into the sport. And so if I could, wave a magic wand and wish something for 26 or for some of these other events, it would be to have those larger than life kind of figures and players who have an opportunity to, I think, captivate a country and rally, the 330 plus million people that we have here behind a team. Because that's when things get, really, really exciting.
The answers are interesting because it sort of highlights the complexity, because you have the technical piece. You're talking there a lot about marketing and storytelling and branding. You have a business piece, which I'm sure there's a lot of that in England as well. I mean, you have the difference of opinion between a club owner at one level versus club owner at another versus the federation versus everything else. I mean, it's a really difficult set of factors to align. Was that similar as well in when you're describing what was going on in England?
Hugely similar. You only got to think of the Premier League, and I say this respectfully. You've got 20 shareholders or clubs, all with one vote each. If you want to get something changed, it's potentially 14 votes, and even that's to do with youth development. You want to look to make a change, but the needs of a Man City versus the needs of a Southampton or an Ipswich, I say this respectfully because it will be very, very different. So, you imagine that then on a greater landscape when you start to then think about football league clubs and then the whole grassroots game all coming together. And, there was a lot of this, some organisations had to give some stuff up that they'd done for a long time to, truly benefit the whole system. And, but in return, there was obviously a big collaborative program that went on behind the scenes. And, you only got to look at, individual player development in England 10 years ago or past that was, they weren't producing enough technically good players. And, they've gone from that to hopefully the modern day now where you can really see a lot of great young kids, exciting, coming to the system. But that's not necessarily all to do with what the FA did at the international level or the Premier League did at the youth level. That's to do with the kids' first experience when they were 5, that the coach was able to give them what they needed to fall in love with the game rather than out of love with the game. Because as we both know, these kids of today have so many opportunities to play a variety of sports. Why choose soccer? So, everything had to feel connected like a golden thread that ran through everything. And, I think England did a good job at doing that. And I think, we have to do an even better job at by the way, the size, the scale, the scope is 100 times the size, and it's 100 times more complex. But I think if everyone comes together with the right intent, which is to put the player at the center of the process, then we've got a great opportunity.
Okay, we're going to take another break and be back with Christian Lavers and Doug Bracken and their visit with U.S. Soccer's Emily Cosler and Matt Crocker. When we return, Doug Bracken asked Mr. Crocker specifically the importance of coaching education.
Nike is a proud sponsor of ECNL. Nothing can stop what we can do together to bring positive change to our communities. You can't stop sport because hashtag you can't stop our voices. Follow Nike on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Welcome back to Breaking the Line, the ECNL Podcast, another special edition coming out of the ECNL Coaching Symposium and AGM in Las Vegas. I turn it back over to the ECNL's Doug Bracken.
You mentioned access for all players at the grassroots level and all that. How important is access to coaching education to more coaches, and how do you do it?
Yeah, I'm going to take this because I am, by the way, super passionate about this.
Please.
It is the biggest lever that we can pull to positively influence player development in this country. Because coach education, if done right and scaled up, will give us the opportunity to have a touch point with every coach that works at every age and stage across the country. And if we can do it in the right way that doesn't just tell, that actually it's not about telling, it's about us sharing, it's about us collaborating, it's about us giving resources to support that coach, it's about us sharing and working with them in their own environment and within these clubs. If we can build that system, and I know where we are now compared to where we need to go to fully grow that out, to be able to cover the country, the size and scale that it is. But as a governing body, that's our responsibility for the game. It's not, I say this respectfully, Wales' responsibility or France's responsibility. That's us as Americans to do that. And, I'm passionate about making sure that the next sporting director that is US is American, that the next, the coaches are coming through are American, the administrators, et cetera, et cetera. So I think coach education by far is our biggest lever, because we got an opportunity to really support and influence the coaches that work every day with those players, whereas we only get that 50 days a year if we're lucky. $1,000,000%.
I think one thing that we've just started to talk about too is the first interaction is often like a parent coach or a volunteer coach. And so obviously the importance of licensing and what we do at the pro level and the A level and the B level, but what are we doing to make sure that, the parent of their 5-year-old who just wants to play soccer has the right toolkit so that they make sure they're creating an environment where there is fun and there is belonging, and how do we provide them with, easy resources where they show up, to the field after work 10 minutes before, and they have, a game plan for practice already set because U.S. Soccer provide them with that, and they don't have to do all the work themselves, right? The more we can take off of the plates of those volunteer coaches or those parents, especially at that grassroots level, the more we can start to ensure that there's fun and there's belonging and that people's first interactions with the sport are a really positive one. And then obviously where we go, building on that from a licensing and from a more competitive levels is important. But that's one thing we've talked a lot about with Soccer Forward Foundation and the U.S. Way, and every nook and cranny of U.S. Soccer is, what is that first touch point? How do we make sure that no matter what your background is, you have the opportunity to create that environment?
And those are two very different problems, right? You have mass numbers at a very low level.
Yep.
But then, because licensing and education is one thing, but there's been a huge lack of mentorship or opportunity as well. I mean, I think we see this when a national team coach job becomes open and you say, who is prepared at all to take that job? There should be a list of people that have had enough experience or enough qualifications to say they're ready, and then you choose the right one. And I think it feels like, and this is not just a U.S. Soccer Federation thing, I think it's been everywhere, it's been a very closed shop in terms of providing opportunity, access, even for people just to observe, for people to be embedded for a little bit, to create that sort of bridge to the next step. Because being successful in college as a coach doesn't mean you're going to be successful as a pro. And being successful as a U16 youth coach doesn't mean you're going to be successful in college. I mean, the game is the same in some ways. Obviously, there's some differences, but the context is entirely different. And that's been missing as well. Is that something you guys think about in terms of training at the higher levels for a broader pool of coaches?
No, absolutely. I think there's, when you could talk about the bookend and the opportunity to really positively influence that first grassroots experience, but also those coaches who have either been identified as future high potential coaches, and the best way to identify those coaches is through eyes on the ground, us being in their environments, and seeing and working with clubs and having the relationships with clubs where, we begin to find those things out and we get to see it ourselves and we get the feedback from the clubs themselves. But then also, how do we utilize our national team programs? So it's not just always about formal coach education, it's about coach development, and how do we give them the coach development moments that give them the opportunities and the experience to be better prepared for those types of roles and jobs when they come up in the future. And we're already beginning to talk about, with our 27 national teams and the activities that will be going on at our national training centre, how do we make sure that we get solar, surf coaches or whoever it might be into our under 17 camp to see a training day, to see a game plan, to see to spend time with a coach understanding how they work, and also to test case whether what we say we're doing in the US way actually gets delivered within our national teams, to support and challenge us equally as well. So, and then how do we build, programs where, they get an opportunity to come with us on our, on key tournaments, whether it be Youth World Cups, etc., to give them hopefully those unique experiences that might just give them something a bit different on their CV when they're going for these roles. And then the one final thing is, when we've done our research over the last 18 months and we've spoken to some coaches, it's amazing that, everybody thinks the answers are on the grass. But when you are going for your interview and you're put in front of your board or you're put in front of, people who are going to be the key decision makers, it's amazing how many coaches don't know how to write a CV. It's amazing how many coaches haven't got their playing philosophy nailed down in a 30-minute presentation. It's amazing how a lot of them aren't necessarily great in the team room, be away from the grass. These are all skills that the modern coach, as well as understanding data and analytics, there's such a pick and mix of experiences now that you need to be a top level coach. But it's amazing how many coaches focus the answers being always on the grass when, if you're lucky, that's 10% of your day.
Yeah, I think we've made it, 45 minutes or so before bringing up the National Training Center and the opportunities that facility will present for community building and mentorship on and off the pitch will be exceptional. We talk a lot about it being programmed 365 days a year. So, even though there's only 6 FIFA international windows, what does it look like to have education opportunities, learning in these environment opportunities throughout the entire year. And so obviously our headquarters and our staff and our offices will be there, but we'll have space and facilities for all of our members to host their annual general meetings there. If we want to host referee workshops, coaching education classes, having that facility, the unlock it will provide to support everything we're doing from a philosophy perspective will just be massive. And I think it will be something that we look back on, 10, 20 years and say that was a huge game changer in our ability to scale and test some of the initiatives that we're talking about today. I know we both moved down to Atlanta over the past, couple of months in preparation for that. And just the excitement that facility will be not just for the 27 national teams, but every single person who's participating in soccer. That's what gets us excited. Knowing that it should be a place that, you want to go to Cooperstown as a kid playing baseball. Like, you want to go to the National Training Center, whether you're a parent, you're a player, you're a coach, you're a ref, you're an administrator, you're a scout, because that is the home.
And for Doug, is there going to be an over 50 national team that he might be able to try out for?
No, I don't run. I don't run.
But listen, we got the fields for it. So
for the AGM to go there, you're going to need some blackjack tables. For some of these.
Listen, we've got some VIP spaces. They look pretty swanky. I saw the most recent renderings, so we will definitely have some opportunities for folks to go and step in and say, "Man, this is a world-class facility that is helping us build world-class teams and staff and opportunities." So,
as you guys have kind of undergone this adventure of evaluating U.S. soccer or the ecosystem or all the things that we've talked about, is there one thing that's jumped out to you that either was like, wow, that's a huge challenge that we really need to get an answer to, or even something that you've been pleasantly, surprised about that you felt like you could lean into? Any one thing that struck you either way as you guys have done that?
Go for it. I'll follow.
The one real positive is, as we begin to, 18 months of listening and learning, and like I mentioned, there's nothing new in in the US way, but when we're beginning now to articulate this, and maybe I'll be wrong today when we present to you guys, is the real positive sense of organizations that we've spoken to going, yeah, we want to be part of that. And we don't know exactly what that means right now, and I'm sure there'll be some challenges to solve. But everywhere we've gone, there's been a real positivity and an energy for this could be the moment, and we need to take it. So I think that's been the real positive. The thing that I'm still trying to wrap my small little brain around is
that England brain.
The W, the focus on winning at young age levels, and the production of league tables that focuses on the team that is right at the very top of that scale. Because sort of my experience sort of tells me that that's not always the best indicator of talent and talent development. There's a lot of whispering talent.
It helps you acquire talent here. That's
and I think as a parent, a question that I would love to ask parents is: do you send your child to a place that wins, or do you send your child to a place where there is great development and individual development happening?
What they say and what they do are two opposite things. So they say development, but what they do is, I guess, I know I want you to answer this too, but what I would say is we are, and I think you guys would agree, we're a fairly young soccer culture where a lot of people who played the game at a reasonable level, a level that helps you understand the game, there are more of those people coming into the culture. Yeah. And so maybe that could be the answer to alleviate some of that.
Yeah, and I think the winning is an important American trait, but I think there's a difference between a winning mentality and a win at all costs mentality.
We shouldn't let winning get in the way of our main task.
We just want to make U.S. soccer great again.
Wow, golly. No comment.
By the way, I'm coaching my son's under-8 team. I'm 2 training sessions in. I can tell you that winning is nowhere near the realm of possibility at this point.
Is it a humbling experience?
Anywhere near the priorities as well.
I think winning at that age is trying to just keep them all on the same
surviving
field,
the hour and a half is the win for me.
I went from college coaching to youth coaching, and one of the first teams I had was a U9 girls team. And first 2 weeks, I went home and said, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I can't control these kids at all.
Yeah.
So it is a humbling experience.
And it's even harder when it's your kids.
Yeah,
as well,
yes. He and I are different. I made the conscious effort not to coach my kids.
Okay.
But back to you on the one thing.
Yeah, I'll just hop in quickly, right? Christian called me out earlier, background's in management consulting. And so I'm going to give more of the business answer. But I nerd out over the potential economic alignment that could happen in this country. When I think about the opportunity to really maximize what we want to do and really propel American soccer into the next stratosphere of opportunity here, we're spending billions of dollars already as a country on this game. How do we start to actually align economic incentives so that we're contributing to the same end outcome of that player development versus, trying to fight with one another over said player? And it's way easier said than done. And there's, a billion considerations to work through. But when I think of an opportunity to, foster the pathway that we've talked about today, to increase investment in the game, if you can start to drive alignment between the federation, between our pro leagues, between our youth organizations in college, and start getting people to swim in the same direction or even put them in the same boat and row in the same direction, that just feels like a huge potential opportunity for me. And it might be a 20-year transformation that we have to go through. It might be a 20-month one. But when I just look at the quantity of money that is being spent on sports in America, and I think of the opportunity that we have if we can properly harness that for good and for a way that ensures soccer is accessible. I would quit all other jobs in life to answer that question and to figure that out, because I think it presents such a unique opportunity.
What a wonderful visit with Emily Cosler and Matt Crocker from U.S. Soccer, joining Christian Lavers and Doug Bracken at the ECNL Coaching Symposium and AGM in Las Vegas. We've reached the point where it's time for Bracken's Brain Buster, and that's what we'll hit after this message.
Soccer.com is proud to partner with the ECNL to support the continued development of soccer in the U.S. at the highest levels. We've been delivering quality soccer equipment and apparel to players, fans, and coaches since 1984. Living and breathing the beautiful game ourselves, our goal at Soccer.com is to inspire you to play better, cheer louder, and have more fun. Visit Soccer.com today to check out our unmatched selection of gear, expert advice, and stories of greatness at every level of the game.
Welcome back to Breaking the Line, the ECNL Podcast, another special edition coming out of the ECNL Coaching Symposium and AGM in Las Vegas. I turn it back over to the ECNL's Doug Bracken.
Just for context, Dean, our esteemed host of the podcast, always includes his wife in the answer somehow, and if I ask a question, he always gives multiple answers. So he's set the bar for everybody.
Pretty low.
Yeah, pretty low. Yeah, that's right. So we make fun of him for that. So I'm going to ask the same question I asked the last group, because we're all here in Vegas. The question is, are you a gambler? And if you were, what would be your game of choice?
We were actually just discussing this very question right before we sat down here. So we are somewhat prepared, actually. I am
Emily
not
was
a
like,
gambler.
please take my ATM card so I
If
don't
I
get in
could
trouble.
control $1 billion of soccer spending, black or red?
Yeah, right on that roulette. I am not a gambler. I have a slightly addictive personality, so I don't think it would be good to enter into the gambling stratosphere. But every once in a while, Super Bowl square, a March Madness bracket, a World Cup bracket. I like to dabble a little bit there. Will I spend $50 on a blackjack table? Maybe. But anything beyond that,
But you're not a gambler.
It's not my thing. I'll set
I've
the
done
bar.
all these things,
I'll set it, $20 here, maybe 50 if we're
Maybe-
feeling frisky.
Maybe you're in denial as well.
Maybe.
Cognitive dissonance going
Yeah,
on over there.
that's how you what is it? Ignorance is bliss. So I'll just stick with that. But you will not find me at 2 a.m. downstairs in the Circa Resort poker tables. I can promise you that.
All right, Matt.
It's a boring answer, but it's exactly the same. I'm not a gambler. But what I will say is we did a great, in about 2017, we were a lot of talk with our national coaches when I was with England around probability. So we actually got a professional poker player in. So we had Gareth Southgate and all the national coaches around with the chips. He taught us how to play poker. And basically it was amazing to observe the behavior of these coaches who got excited and chucked everything in, which reflected their personalities. And
Zero
again,
restraint.
10 minutes to go, 1-0 down.
What do you mean counterattack?
They just, yeah. It was amazing to watch the various personalities unfold and how those were connected to the coaching behavior. So
Matt said he's going to do a boring answer and then tells like this great
If
story.
you were to be a gambler, you would gamble. What would be your game?
It would have to be blackjack 21 because that's the only game that I know to play.
So we'll both be at the blackjack table. No, all kidding aside.
I'll just answer that question with saying, if you would have bet in 2016 on ECNL and U.S. Soccer having a pleasant podcast and a lot of good discussions and relationships, you would have made a lot of money because that was not on the scorecard. So credit to you guys and your teams for doing all the work that you've done to bring U.S. soccer in a different direction and to bring U.S. soccer, I think, closer to all of soccer and us specifically. Appreciate that, and the alignment stuff resonates with us. You'll hear that out of me tonight a lot as well, and so thank you.
No, and thanks for the invite, and we understand, if we're gonna hopefully make these positive changes that. I think there's that saying: if you wanna go far, go together. If you wanna go fast, go alone. And I think collaboration in this process is going to be so critical. So thank you for having us here, letting us present, and hopefully we can get the right level of support and challenge from you guys to help everybody move forward.
What he said.
Yeah, ditto. Thank you guys. Yeah, obviously we're all cheer for our country and want the best for it. So you certainly have our support, and we look forward to working with you guys. But thank you guys.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
We certainly appreciate Emily Cosler and Matt Crocker from U.S. Soccer. Great job by Christian Lavers and Doug Bracken, our incredible team. Jacob Bourne was huge. Reed Sellers was huge. Our producer, Colin Thrash, was huge. Everybody at the ECNL, always outstanding. In fact, for each and every one of them and all of you, I'm Dean Linke. We'll see you the next time right here on Breaking the Line, the ECNL Podcast.
Thank you for listening to Breaking the Line, the ECNL Podcast. And remember, if you have a question that you want answered on Breaking the Line, the ECNL Podcast, email us at info@theecnl.com.